I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Angela.
We are the Ink Mages. Join us as we discuss all things fantasy, world building, storycraft, myths and legends, and of course, our own imaginative stories. Welcome to the Ink Mages podcast. We are so excited you have joined us today. We have a special episode because we are celebrating the book launch of Arthur and the Golden Dragon, Book 3 in
Yay!
the Chronicles.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited that I can finally say that. You have a trilogy that is out and that is done. So before we get into a fun nerdy fact, just if you can express what it feels like to have finished, the culmination of 3 books in a trilogy.
It's honestly, I feel like I get to celebrate for the first time since I started writing the series because I don't know, the story came to me all as one. And so I've been writing it all as one story, and to have it all done, it feels like I did it. Like I actually wrote the whole story. It's getting out there, and I get to take a deep breath and really celebrate. And I can't wait for people to get to read book 3 because it really packs a punch, and it has some of my most favorite parts of the entire series. And, I can't say enough about how much fun it was to write an undead army. That was a really, really fun thing for me to write. More dragon action, just really exciting scenes with my 3 POV characters, Eleanor, Merlin, and Arthur. And it just full circle all the way around getting to this point. I cannot wait. I personally actually don't even have a copy in my hands yet. So once I do, I'm going to be over the moon. I can't wait to take pictures of me holding all 3 books, and just that feeling is going to be amazing.
I've got the first 2 here. Yes, so I've already, I'm just so excited. I pre-ordered the book. So it is just, waiting for it to arrive.
It's live today. You can get ebook, paperback, and hardback versions of the book. So you get your favorite version of the book.
So excited. I have yet to finish writing a complete series. So my adult fantasy series has 7 books, and I think completed it'll be 8.
Oh my goodness.
Iron Kingdom series might be complete with 4. So I can understand that probably big sigh of relief. Oh my gosh, I completed something. It's different than just completed a book, because that's also a huge sigh, but I completed an entire saga.
Yes, it's like
of a story.
Well, now I feel like I get to move on. I'll never move on from these characters, but now I get to dive into other stories that I've been burning. I'm not one of those that can write a bunch of books simultaneously. And so I've had some other books and stories that I've just been so eager to sink my teeth into. And now I can do that too. I've been given permission. I've released the Once and Future Chronicles, and I have a lot of spin-offs planned. So if you love Once and Future Chronicles, there's going to be plenty more.
So excited for those additional stories set in your world. So share a fun nerd fact with us that maybe our listeners haven't heard before.
Well, since we're talking about the Once and Future Chronicles, I think probably one of the nerdiest things about just writing those books for me was before even writing them, I became the Arthurian legend nerd of the world. I mean, I took a college course on Arthurian legend, just devouring every myth, legend, historical concept of the story. I think I watched the BBC Merlin, which is a TV show I actually super love. I think my favorite thing about that series was the brotherhood and the self-sacrifice. I just loved it. And I think that really inspired my just some of the characterization that I really wanted to have in my stories, just that self-sacrifice and willing to lay down your life for somebody else, and maybe not being able to have the world your way, but it's worth it because of your love for somebody else. And so I super love that show. I think I watched it a couple times. I tend to be kind of a TV show binger, and I don't mind if I've really loved something watching it again and again. I'm like that with Doctor Who and a few others. So I definitely think I got super nerdy, and I think all of the people who knew me during that time had had enough of Arthurian legend because I was just regurgitating. And then, I read mythology books, Celtic mythology books, like they were going out of style. I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of writing this series was the research and getting my head into the space of all of the things that I could pull from. And I ended up taking all of those things and creating my very own world of Arthurian legend. But there were golden nuggets and bits and pieces that I had to include, especially for people who love Arthurian legend, because I know how beloved it is. And I wanted to honor the real rooted, deep seated, sparkly bits of Arthurian legend in my story. And so I definitely got very nerdy. I jumped down the rabbit hole big time with Arthurian legend. And now I am doing that again. I'm excited. I haven't been able to really do that for a series in a while. And now I am jumping deep into Mesopotamian mythology and some really old Babylonian heroes and concepts and ideas of gods and goddesses for my next series that I'll be starting soon. So
and we might revisit that.
yeah.
when we talk about what's coming in the future. But I feel like you really do have to become almost obsessed or become a nerd in what you're writing or what you're really interested in, so you can do a deep dive, and it's going to show in your writing. And it definitely does, because all three of your books are just so infused with lore, legend, and myth. And for me, those are my favorite parts of the stories. Like, I love your characters, but it's like, as soon as Merlin is going to tell a story or do a ballad, I'm just like, like if I was editing it, like when I'm just like, I could turn that mode off, and I'm like, I am so enraptured into what Merlin is talking about. It just takes you on this journey, on this legend. I'm like, this is so good. And the thoughts in my head always were, did she come up with this? Is this a true legend? Is this a true myth? Because it just feels so original. And it's the power of your ability to probably pick and something that is real and then put your spin on it. So yes.
And there's a little bit of both. I have myths that I took that are real legends, and then I made them my own, because I wanted everything that kind of deviated from the storyline. So if there was a ballad, I wanted it to be relevant to the story, and not just a random. But then there were some that I just made up based off of how I knew those stories went. I went, I'm going to just create one. And in fact, there was one that I created in Eleanor and the Song of the Bard that was actually inspired by a Russian myth and not a Celtic myth at all. But I made my own spin on it and made it kind of Celtic and designed it that way.
So explain a little bit of what is the conflict or the plot that happens at the beginning of the story with the third one, Arthur and the Golden Dragon.
So it begins where war is now imminent. For those who've been following along with the story, we've done so much just to get to this place. We've had kind of this ominous bad guy in the background who hasn't really reared his head physically too much. Like, we haven't really seen him. We've heard about it. We've barely figured out who he is. And then book 2, we have this kind of adventure through time, which is necessary for the big punch that begins with book 3. Yes, Merlin and the Magic of Time. And I do love that in my books, you've got all this historical legend that's rooted in real history. But then you've got some real heavy fantasy and time travel. So, and time travel is intermingled in all 3 books. It is also in book 3. So there's still more time travel fun that we get to enjoy in book 3. But it starts with war. The enemy has finally reared his head. But they're in this position where the enemy is still like 50 steps ahead of them. And Arthur's having to try to figure out what he's supposed to do. But you've got it now that you have Arthur in the story, you've got a character who is not going to allow the enemy to continue to evade. So he's going to aggressively, Arthur's used to being able to overcome the unovercomable. That's not really a word, but overcome odds that you cannot.
We make up words. It's okay.
We can, right? We're writers. But he has overcome so many odds just in, his history with the Saxons. And now he's got this enemy that he can't figure out and wrap his brain around. And then we have just the conflict of the characters and coming back to the world of Pride Anne and trying to adjust to all of their realities. And Eleanor's not happy. She's lost a lot. And Arthur is just asking too much from her at this state of the game. And really, she's asking too much of him. And it starts off with kind of a bang and a big conflict, lots of magic right from the get-go, lots of deception from the enemy right from the get-go. I would say that this book carries a lot of heart-rending tragedy moments. There's good payoff. So yes. There's a lot of really good payoff in this story. And of course, you have Merlin amps up his magic in this one too, which makes it really fun.
Yes. I know there was like a chapter where you did bring me to tears. I was like, I sent you a message right afterwards. I'm like, well, that was a beautiful chapter. Now I'm crying. So I'm going to go wipe my eyes before I jump back into the next chapter to edit.
Well, my themes throughout from beginning of the series to even the conflict at the end is all of this is outside of the control of my characters. There's really not a whole lot they can do. And what happens when the worst possible thing happens and everything's dashed to pieces? Like, how do you recover from that? How is there hope? And the theme goes throughout the series all the way into book 3. And I love how the events kind of come to this final revelation for my 3 characters of, they really are not in control of what's happening, but there is something more that's going on behind the scenes that maybe they can trust in. And I love being able to weave that into the story in book 3 really, really strongly.
So because it is Arthur and the Golden Dragon, was it fun? Was it fun or more challenging to bring Arthur back in as like king on the throne? Because, when it comes to Arthurian legend, that has been the thing where one day he'll return in triumph and come back as king of the Britons. So was it like this, almost, I get to do this? Or was there also a bit of like, I get to do this challenge with bringing Arthur back?
I was really excited to sink my teeth into Arthur. I think one of my initiatives in writing the story was that though I enjoy a good tragedy, I can read a book that has a tragic end. So, Braveheart's a perfect example. If there's a good reason for the tragedy, I love it because there's glory in it. I don't necessarily love stories that have tragedy that have no purpose to the sad ending. You're like, here's my unpopular opinion, but Legends of the Fall is probably one of the worst movies I've ever watched in my entire life because it was for tragedy's sake that the whole story existed. And there was no redemption. There was nothing redeeming. There was no reason for the loss. It just was bad. And so
my husband has specifically told me not to watch that movie because I asked before. He's like, nope, you will hate it.
Yeah, it's just there's no reason for the loss. Like even in Romeo and Juliet, there's a reason for the loss. So you can get in, Titus, you talk about Shakespeare and his tragedies. There's a reason for the loss. And for all of the cataclysmic bad that happened. So in Arthurian legend, there's so much glory. So we're talking like old Arthurian legend. There's so much glory. There's so much promise. There's prophecies about Arthur and who he's going to be and who he's going to become. He pulls the sword from the stone. Epically, he's going to become this thing. And then he's killed and it's over. And
Mhm.
for some reason, that loss of Arthur, even when I was a kid and like I knew that Mordred killed Arthur, and you're like, this is it? Like, this is how
It
it
can't
ends?
be.
Like, what happens to everybody else? What happens to the kingdom? Is it just over? And, historically, the reign of Arthur, whoever he was, a chieftain or a leader, it did kind of like, it was a pulse, it existed and then it was gone. And, but still, I just wasn't satisfied with that. And so I was very eager to create how I felt like the story could have gone, how it could have changed, and why nobody remembers maybe this part of the story. And they only remember Arthur's death, because there's a lot of regret in Arthur for having lost the kingdom in the first place. He blames the responsibility. He bears the responsibility, and knows that it was his poor choices and his pride and his lack of aim at the right things. Chasing after the Grail when it was just a ghost, that caused everything to crumble, and ultimately for his death and a lot of suffering to happen to Guinevere, Merlin, all of his men. Book one starts off, all of his men are killed but two. So I'm like, and this is he's coming back just after basically everything has, this was where he left off. And so he does not feel like he's earned the throne. He doesn't feel like he deserves to be there. And certainly he feels like he has let the whole world down. And and I love developing that, and kind of helping redeem Arthur in a way.
Yes, and it's so poignant. And you feel all those emotions you said, like throughout book 3 with Arthur. He really wrestles with his place and who he was before he met his end, and so it's like trying to find his footing again, and then meeting the expectations of his people and then the ones closest to him, and then just like wrestling with the notion of being a father when he hasn't actually Guinevere hasn't given birth to a child yet. So that whole time conundrum is just so well played, and it creates so much inner conflict and inner turmoil for him that I really loved his point of view scenes and chapters, and especially like the flashbacks. My favorite one was with the Fisher King, and that's Fisher King, that's right, and his daughter, like the Lady of the Lake. Oh,
some of my favorite things to write. It was so fun.
Yes, because it's the myth component. And so, and definitely the beginning with the Sword and the Stone too, like leading up to that, and Arthur being younger and not really sure what's going on. And Merlin has all the answers, but he won't say.
Yes. Yeah.
He's keeping poor Arthur in suspense. There's just so many good little nuggets for people who love Arthurian legend. And speaking of that Merlin show, the BBC one, I remember I love the show, but how it ends with like Merlin just like walking across some like street in England, and there's like that hill in the distance, and it's like maybe one day it's hinting that Merlin's still waiting for Arthur to wake up and be the once and future king. And so it's just so satisfying to read your book and be like, he's here, he's back.
It didn't end that way.
No, we have a whole new story, which then it's like it opens the door of what's going to happen.
Yes,
because we're in uncharted territory.
Yes, which is why I've got so many ideas burning for even what could happen next. But I think that was another thing that really pulled me towards this potential story with time travel and twists of ideas of Arthur returning, because throughout Arthurian legend there was that prophecy: he's the once and future king, and that's why I named it the Once and Future Chronicles, because there is always this prophecy in Arthurian legend that Arthur could come back, he could return. How would that happen? Would it be reincarnated as somebody else, or another hero that would be like Arthur and his spirit would be bright in him? Like, what would that look like? And I took my own spin on that prophecy, coming to pass. By the way, spoilers, if you haven't read book 1 and book 2, you can't talk about book 3 without, releasing some spoilers. So if you haven't read book 1 and book 2, maybe The
Get
bits and
on it.
pieces, probably won't make a lot of sense till you read the books anyway, but yeah, get on reading those first 2 books. There's a lot of mystery and fun that unravels, that leads up
And
to book 3.
there's a dragon.
Yeah.
So, and that is
Yes.
like one of my favorite side characters is the dragon. So when you were crafting, Gwylir, is that how we say her
Yeah,
name?
exactly right. Yes.
Okay. Was she based on like a true myth of a dragon, or just like, nope, I'm gonna just come up and put my own personality in this dragon and incorporate magic and time and with her?
Uh, she was of my own creation. I very intentionally picked certain mythological creatures to be represented in my story because I wanted to really bring in some of that Celtic myth with creatures that, in medieval age were considered real things, real ideas. But they're all like these creatures that exist beyond the veil of the other world, creatures that exist kind of in the spirit realm that can present themselves in the physical realm. And a dragon was one that I was like, hands down, definitely going to have a dragon in the story. But I also had this developing idea when I was first writing the books, like, I have to solve this conundrum of time. And this isn't science fiction.
Right.
And dragons are always known to have kind of these secret magic. They were like guardians of magic, having different gifts, whether it's healing, or having a special bond with a human, like when you look at like the Aragon series, or they always have kind of this mysterious wisdom about them too, kind of an all-knowing, understanding, prophetic essence to them. And so kind of my conundrum with time was solved with the dragon having this kind of like father time ability where they are the essence of time. They exist inside and outside of time. And they are now and present, and they were, and they're present, and they're past, and it all coming together.
It's a paradox.
Yeah, and the dragon kind of being able to see the whole thing. And one of the things that is fun about my time travel is you can't just time travel. It's like you've already been everywhere that you're going to be, and you're discovering it through the places in time that you've been. And so it's not time travel like a time machine where you can just jump to the past and the future. You've already been there and you're remembering it. And so it's kind of this weird concept that the dragon can see these things and knows these things and has the ability, but humans can't typically carry that kind of magic. And that's what makes my Merlin and Eleanor characters unique. So they are able to be carriers of this magic because it's necessary. So anyway, it was kind of a fun thing. I remember when I thought the idea, I was like, oh, what a fun way to bring in a dragon. Yes, yeah. As kind of this prophetic, all-seeing guardian of time.
Well, I love the dragon's role and purpose in book 3, which won't say because, no, you got to read it.
Yeah.
But there are some wonderful just moments, especially with the dragon. So if you have read 1 and 2, then you will be thoroughly happy and satisfied and excited when you get to those parts.
Well, and I get to include her a little bit more, which is fun.
Yes, that's true. She does play a bigger role for sure. And there are some humorous moments too with the dragon.
Because she's a dragon. She's not a human.
She's a dragon. She's done the things that she thinks, and again, like with her perceptions of life and death and time and how humans are. She has her own ways that she thinks about it because she's not a human. So it's like, oh, what? You need fire? Like, you can't stay in this cottage?
Yeah.
What? It's fine.
You need more to survive than just a carcass,
Yes, just a carcass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely some fun, humorous moments. And I know I've asked you this, but our listeners may not know, but who is your favorite character to write in this series?
Oh gosh, hands down Merlin. He's my muse. He was what I really started with. I mean, again, I think my whole fascination with Arthurian legend was Merlin. I love the idea of magic and being a mage, and kind of this mysterious idea of what a person like that would look like if they really existed, and the fact that, because everything that I love about Arthurian legend is the fact that there were these characters that existed in history, that there are legends that were made about them, and maybe, they were exaggerated and amplified. And so very fascinated with Merlin. One of my favorite Lord of the Rings characters is Gandalf. I always like the wizard or the mage. And then I really got lit up with the idea in Arthurian legend. There is this one story where Merlin is transformed into a young man. And then at other times he is an old man. And then other times he actually is transformed and he's a changeling, and that there are other identities of Merlin other than an old sage with a white beard and a blue pointy hat, which is like our classic idea of Merlin, right? And which
Disney,
yeah, the Disney concept of him, which is solidified in our minds who Merlin is. It's funny because I kind of dig at that in book one, just the belief Merlin is, and then, the Merlin show where you've got this young, teenager who's appearing as Merlin. It's kind of like the origin stories of Merlin and Arthur in that TV show. And then I also love the idea of this fair folk, these kind of almost elfin culture that is woven into Celtic mythology, these people who were before the humans. And I wanted to weave that into my interpretation of Merlin. And then he becomes this kind of not immortal, but this being that ages much more slowly, kind of more like the Numenorians in Lord of the Rings. He ages much more slowly because he has this bloodline intermingled with his own. And so he's this young 30-something man who's actually probably in his 90s, and has all of these interesting things connected to him that has made him this druid that is not like the others, has more power and more ability, and kind of a little more strength to hold a kingdom together than anybody else. So that was fun crafting this kind of new concept of Merlin. I don't think I've seen many versions of Merlin like the one that I've written. And it was definitely a more romantic version of Merlin for sure. And I love diving deep into his character. I know it sounds sad, but I know writers can be so mean when it comes to our characters, but I kind of like the suffering and the grief that he has to go through, because it kind of creates this golden nugget that, makes him who he is. And so he was my favorite by far, the biggest inspiration for my stories, for sure.
He was my favorite character to read through every book. And for me, it stems, I think, from loving the BBC Merlin show and following this young Merlin, because my concept before that was the wizard blue pointy hat who says what a big medieval mess, just kind of a silly old man, so your version, just seriously love and swoon. All right, well, can you share what is going to be next for you? The trilogy is complete, but we know that there's lots of more stories percolating.
I'm currently writing the book, The Lost Son of Orcades, which is, the origins are the island of Orkney in Scotland. So Orcades would be more of the older interpretation of that place. And this is going to be following the son of Lot and the witch Morgan, and kind of his origins and beginnings. This is a YA book, and I'm actually 70% through the book already. I've written it, and I actually hope to be done with it soon. I'm having such a fun time writing it. This character called Dune, his name actually means in Welsh, blackened or plagued one. He actually starts out in the story not knowing his true name. He knows where he came from, but he doesn't know really much more, because he kind of grows up as a kind of rejected, cursed one. And he's crippled. So he was crippled at birth, and he's in a lot of pain throughout the story. And his heart's desire is to be a hero or someone of worth. And anyway, this story is a prequel, and it is one of my very first stories. I have a whole bunch of stories I have planned for this series, but called The Iliad of Pridean's Heroes, which follows all of the different men that become part of Arthur's entourage and where their origins, where they came from. I have one planned for Bedwyr, maybe even one for Guinevere. And certainly all of them are going to intermingle in the stories, and you'll see them all kind of be highlighted. But this one follows, I'm not going to spoil which hero, that this young man becomes, but he's 17 and he meets Nimue, which is another classic character from Arthurian legend that I get to weave into my stories. And anyway, it's been really fun to write. It's definitely a little darker story than I'm used to writing. But I super love how it's coming out, and it's been so fun to go down the road with some new characters as well as some old characters. We've got Morgan and Merlin who make an appearance in the story. So, of course, Merlin makes an appearance. He's not one of the main characters, but he is a side character that does come into the story. And so, anyway, that one, I'm almost done with it. So we're getting close to having that one completed. And audiobooks, I'm going to be starting a Kickstarter. So those of you who really want to see the Once and Future Chronicles in audiobook, be paying attention to the Kickstarter that I'm going to be launching soon, because I really have some high hopes for getting these audiobooks made, especially because I want kids who maybe struggle with reading, or people who struggle with reading, to be able to hear these stories. So it is a huge deal for me to be able to get these audiobooks made. So those are in the mix.
So exciting.
Yeah, lots of little things in the mix. I'm even have a gal from Germany who will be interpreting book 1 into German. Because if you didn't know this, if you are a fantasy writer, you don't want to have your first translated book be Spanish, because the biggest nation for fantasy readers in the world is Germany. So
yes.
In fact, some of my book sales that have been going to Europe have been German readers. So I have seen some of my book sales being sold over there. So anyway, those are some of the things in the mix. Going to keep writing. We've got other series going on, other books that I can't wait to get to. So
excited. You are so busy. You've got all these ideas, and I am so for them, because I want more stories from your crafted world, more from your characters. I'm hoping that there'll be little fun cameos of characters from the current trilogy that might show up. Maybe if it's a past origin story, like if we get a Parador origin, like I'd love if Arthur could show up.
Yes, definitely.
Or different people like Merlin. So just in younger, seeing them as younger men, that would be awesome. Oh, so yes, excited. So where can people get Arthur and the Golden Dragon?
Well, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold, really, but Amazon's going to be your hot ticket when it releases today. I keep forgetting it. Today's the day. It's out.
You're so used to saying it's coming.
Yes. Yes. And it is available. You can go to my website, angelarhughes.com. Also, if you want to catch some details, see the book trailer, find out a little bit more about the book. Yeah, so it's available to buy today.
Awesome. Cannot wait for it to come in the mail. I will be shooting you a photo. Yes. I'll just probably pose with all of them.
Yes, I would love, if any of you buy my book, please take a photo and show me a picture of you holding my book. I don't know. I know Stephanie probably feels this way too. There's something so exciting when you see somebody holding your book and they're sharing it with you. So please do that. And you guys, thank you for joining me for launch day. I can't believe my trilogy is complete. I can't believe I get to share it with you, and that I get to now tell more stories and create more adventures. And you get to go on this road with me and with Stephanie and all of the amazing authors we get to have interviews with. So please leave a like, support us, leave a comment. Let us know if there's more books or stories or tips that you'd like to hear from us. And we'll see you next time.